Roll call. Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Here.
Just in time. Dr. Cohen?
Here.
Mrs. Howard? Mrs. Lax?
Here.
Mr. McAvoy?
Here.
Mr. Philipchak?
Present.
Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
Mr. Simmons?
Here.
We have a quorum. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed and acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the East Brunswick Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Board of Education offices located at 760 Route 18, East Brunswick, New Jersey. Written notice was also provided to the Sentinel, the Newark Star-Ledger, the Home News and Tribune, and the Municipal Clerk of East Brunswick on July 7th, 2015, and December 23rd, 2015. All Board of Education meetings, with the exception of executive session discussions, are videotaped for later broadcast. It is the policy of the Board of Education that videotape meetings are not edited for any purpose. Individuals who speak at the board's public meetings should be aware of these videotaping rules. Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the reorganization of the Board of Education. At this meeting, we will begin with the appointment of the chairperson, temporary chairperson, followed by the oaths of office for the newly elected board members, and then nominations for president and vice president of the board. So, with that said, may I have a motion for item R1, appointment of temporary chairperson?
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Dr. Cohen and seconded by Mrs. Becker. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. So we will move on to the oaths of office. And as has been our tradition, we will conduct the oath of office front and center, and Mrs. Becker will be first up. Which side would you like to stand on? This one? Technicalities. Mrs. Becker, you've already raised your hand. You know the routine. I, Vicki Becker,
I, Vicki Becker,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith
and that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
and to the governments established
and to the governments established
in the United States and this state,
in the United States and this state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people.
And I do solemnly swear
And I do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications
that I possess the qualifications
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
for the office of member
for the office of member
of a Board of Education,
of a Board of Education,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all duties of that office
all duties of that office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Mr. McAvoy.
My wife, Dawn, holding my finger.
Mr. McAvoy, please repeat after me. I, Kevin T. McAvoy,
I, Kevin T. McAvoy,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith
and I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
and to the governments established
and to the governments established
in the United States
in the United States
and this state,
and in this state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people.
And I do solemnly swear
And I do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications
that I possess the qualifications
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
for the office of member
for the office of member
of a Board of Education,
of a Board of Education,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all duties of that office
all duties of that office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Please join me.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Meredith Shaw,
I, Meredith Shaw,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith
and that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
and to the governments established
and to the governments established
in the United States
in the United States
and this state
and this state,
under the authority of the people.
under the authority of the people.
And I do solemnly swear
And I do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of member
for the office of member
of a Board of Education,
of the Board of Education,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly perform
and justly perform
all duties of that office
all duties of that office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. I think time's up. Okay, so next on the agenda is when we accept nominations for the office of President of the Board of Education. And are there any such nominations? Dr. Cohen?
Yes. As many of you know, this board has embarked this year on a rather robust agenda. Many of those items that we're looking to tackle this year include huge issues such as major changes in security, curriculum upgrades, a lot of work with facilities, and most importantly, a strategic plan that this board is looking to put in place for the public schools that gives us direction for and over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. I believe many of you have even gotten robocalls about a meeting that's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks for community input on that. And with that being said, with such a large agenda, it is important that this board have at its helm and as a leader, somebody who has the organizational skills, the management skills, the intellect, and the drive and vision to get us to where we need to be if we intend to accomplish all those things. And as a result, it is without hesitation that I'd like to recommend our friend and colleague, Mr. Todd Simmons, for the role of president of this board. I know he possesses all the qualities that we seek, and I'm certain that he will take us where we need to be on such a robust agenda. So I'd like to put his name into nomination for the role of president of the Board of Education.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Shaw. Is there any discussion? Are there any other nominations from the floor? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call on the nomination of Todd Simmons as president of the Board of Education. Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Simmons.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Dr. Cohen, they were some of the nicest words anybody's ever said about me. Thank you very much for that. But more importantly, for your years of service here, you talk about robust things. Well, two to my right is probably one of the most significant things that we did during your helm. It's recruiting our new superintendent. Boy, I hope that you are still happy to be here.
You're still calling me new.
Yes, well, okay. Relatively new. If you think about some of the history here, you're still relatively new. Strategic planning, I said, which was your thought leadership, and of course, getting through Park and all the other things that we still have to do to the board. Thank you for your votes of confidence. Mrs. Shaw, Mrs. Becker, Mr. McAvoy, congratulations on your reelection. I look forward to the things we have ahead of us this year. So thank you. On that note, may I have a nomination for Vice President of the Board of Education? Mrs. Shaw.
I had the pleasure and honor of nominating Vicki Becker to be Vice President of the Board of Ed last year for her first term. As I began to construct a little speech, my husband said, "Why bother with a speech? Everyone knows her. She's been around a long time. She does a good job. Let's elect her." But I decided that I was going to write a little speech anyway. My speech of a year ago kind of reviewed some of Mrs. Becker's personal history as well as some of her outstanding personality traits that have contributed to the development of her leadership skills and also to many of her accomplishments. This evening, however, I want to focus on just the work she has done during this first year as Vice President of our board. Vicki is part of a board team that is initiating the strategic planning process, including a timetable, charter, goals, and an action plan that will be in large part based on community input. In regards to the new teacher evaluation system, Vicki has developed a broad understanding of the Danielson model. As chair of the board's curriculum committee, Mrs. Becker has worked with Mrs. Gulick on a fresh approach to curriculum innovation, helping to develop a new format for meetings that will increase board input into the ever-changing needs of our students. Her work on the technology committee is focused on the integration of technology and curriculum, as well as the types of devices that students can use. As a valued member of our Student Services Committee, her concern for all students on the educational spectrum encouraged the development of programs to help all of our kids to feel engaged in our school and classroom communities. She has always felt strongly about providing support and mentoring for each child to help ensure their success. And finally, she also serves as the board's lead negotiator with the East Brunswick Principal and Supervisors Association. This is an impressive list by anyone's standards, accomplished by someone who truly understands the complexities of raising children during challenging times. I believe that Vicki Becker and Todd Simmons will be a strong leadership team for our board, and I hope that you will join me in supporting Vicki Becker for Vice President of the Board of Education.
Any second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Cohen. Any other nominations for Vice President of the Board of Education? On the nomination of Vicki Becker as Vice President of the Board of Education, will the Secretary please call the roll?
Mrs. Becker.
Yeah, yes.
Mrs. Chu.
Yes.
Dr. Cohen.
Yes.
Mrs. Lax.
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy.
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Simmons.
Yes.
Motion
Nomination
carries.
carries. I got it. Vice President Becker.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for... Thank you all so much for having faith in me. Mary, thank you for those beautiful words. And I'm going into my 17th year on the board, and I'm as excited as I was when I first started, mainly because of all of you up here, because together we are an awesome team and are doing really good things for this district through challenging times. So thank you again for your faith.
All right. Thank you, and congratulations again. Look forward to working with you.
Yeah, ready to go.
All right, moving on through our reorganization agenda, may I have a motion for item R5, adoption of New Jersey School Board Member Code of Ethics?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Dr. Cohen, second by Mrs. Becker. Is there any discussion? Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes, motion carries. May I have a motion for item R6, approval of Board of Education committees?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Mrs. Becker, second by Mrs. Shaw. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. We now have to move on to our board member prohibited acts and school ethics training. Is this live right now?
Yes, it
Ms.
is.
Juliana, we have our ethics training.
Have it.
Is this our Ferdinand and
Yes.
Columbus
Yes,
example?
I'll have to come up with a new one.
All right, that's all right. It still works, because it seems to have sunk in.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to conduct the annual ethics training. You're going to get a handout that has been updated, and at the back half of the handout, starting on page 9, we've updated some new developments that have occurred in the area of ethics for school board members. I have used the analogy many times of Isabel and Ferdinand, and I'll do it again. Your job as board members are to be like Isabel and Ferdinand, the king and the queen. You buy the ship, you get the compass, and then you hire the skipper or the captain to set sail, and Mr. Columbus is to the right of Mr. Juliana. Your job is to make sure that the districts are well-run. You don't run the day-to-day operations. That's the superintendent's job. And I think that you, this board has done an outstanding job of making sure it's a well-run district, and in terms of your interaction and your expectations of the superintendent and your understanding of your roles as board members, you've demonstrated time and time again. The most important thing to realize is that there's been a kind of a seismic shift at the School Ethics Commission, which is the entity that oversees boards of education. And I want to tell you about the issues that are very, very pressing. First, the School Ethics Commission has refined what they define as conflicts for board members dealing with negotiations. So in the past, a board member who had a spouse who was a member of the NJEA, if that spouse did not work in the district, that board member could ultimately vote on a contract with a union. They could not participate in the negotiation process, but if the memorandum of agreement came before the board, that board member could vote. School Ethics Commission has said that can't happen anymore. And they've actually expanded the definition of family that says that if you have any family member who's a member of the NJEA, child, spouse, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, you can't participate in the negotiations and you can't vote on a contract that comes before you. That's created somewhat of a conundrum in the state of New Jersey, because there are many, many districts, and I'll give you an example of what happened to me in another district, where if you have a membership of the board, you need to have a majority vote on a contract, as we know. And if you have enough people who are conflicted, you then have to do a thing called the Doctrine of Necessity. What happened in one district, and I'll give you an example. We had a district, it was a 7-member district. We had one board member whose daughter worked for the district. That was always a conflict. That person could never vote. That was long-standing precedent. We had another member whose wife worked for another district, was a long-standing member, who had voted on probably a half a dozen contracts, had been on the board for about 15 years. With the passage of this law, he could no longer vote on a contract. And then we had 2 other board members who were newly elected, and those 2 board members were publicly endorsed by the local union, actually got campaign contributions from the local union, and which that's totally appropriate, they could do that, but the School Ethics Commission has ruled that if a board member is publicly endorsed by a union, they're precluded from negotiations and can't vote. So you have a 7-member board. We now have 4 members who have conflicts, 3 who don't. Well, guess what? Out of a 7-member board, you need to have 4 to vote. So we then had to invoke the Doctrine of Necessity, and all these people who had conflicts, one of them having a direct conflict, whose daughter worked for the district, could now vote. So, and the Doctrine of Necessity is a doctrine that you have to actually pass a resolution, the board would have to pass a resolution. You adopt it, invoking the Doctrine of Necessity, saying we have these conflicts and we need to be able to vote on it. You have to list what your conflict is, you have to publish it, send it to the School Ethics Commission, and then you can vote on it. But the way they've now interpreted this, they were trying to preclude conflicts, and what's ended up happening is, by having such a restrictive definition of family, they've actually had more and more districts invoking the Doctrine of Necessity, which then allows people with even greater conflicts to vote on a contract. So that's one big change. The second very large change that you should be aware of is the School Ethics Commission has taken a much more closer look at involvement for board members in volunteering for various entities. So a number of years ago, I actually got an ethics opinion from School Ethics Commission talking about a person being an officer in the PTA and serving as a board member. That's no longer permitted. A board member can be involved tangentially with school, local schools, PTAs. They can't be a servant in a leadership role. They can't have too much interaction with staff and students. And what they're trying to do, the School Ethics Commission is attempting to do, is they don't want entanglement of board members in with the staff and in with the students. They want to really ensure that you, as a board, remain a policy-making body to make sure the schools are well-run. And they're trying to preclude board members from becoming overly entangled in the day-to-day operations involved with students and parents and staff. And so the School Ethics Commission has issued this year, or late last year, these various ethics decisions that have really had kind of a profound impact on the landscape of ethics for board members. There's been a couple other interesting updates that I wanted to bring you, make you aware of, is that there was a recent ethics decision in which a school board president served a rice notice on the business administrator. Now, the school board president can serve a rice notice on the superintendent, and as you know, a rice notice is if you're going to discuss an employee's employment, you have to rice them because you're going to have discussion in closed session. And so the board president was authorized to rice the superintendent as the spokesperson for the board. In this case, the board president riced the business administrator, and the School Ethics Commission found that that was a violation. That was overstepping the board president's boundaries. That person should have been riced by the superintendent. There's another case that was recently in the news. It was decided back in May of 2015, and it was with the Perth Amboy School District. And in that case, the School Ethics Commission advised the board member respondents that their participation in approving a settlement agreement was alarming and likely a violation of the School Ethics Act. And in that case, school board members had been sued, and they approved the settlement, and they voted on it. The difficulty with that is that you're a body that has to approve settlements. And so there are been, almost every district I represent is faced with lawsuits at any given time. And ultimately it comes before the board, and very often it's the Board of Education who's sued in a lawsuit, and so you guys are going to have to vote on it. In that type of case, I think what they were talking about there was some accusations about board members, and there was a vote on it, and they said that that was not appropriate. So the most important thing to take away from this is I don't want folks to be fearful. If you have a question or concern, reach out to me. We can research it. There's a lot of case law out there, so we can give you guidance on it. The other thing that we can do also is get an advisory opinion. If you haven't taken action and you think that there might be a conflict, we can write to the School Ethics Commission and get advisory opinion. We can't do it if you've already voted on it, but if you haven't voted on it, we can get an advisory opinion to see if your participation would be a conflict or not, and they'll give it to you. The one thing I tell everyone is there's nothing that's that urgent in life, that if you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel right, recuse yourself, don't do it, pick up the phone, speak to Dr. Vleski, and then Dr. Vleski will reach out to me, and we'll give you an opinion so that you don't misstep, because you're volunteers, you're spending a lot of time, and the last thing we want to see is anyone having an ethics violation levied against them. So I don't know if there's any other questions or concerns you'd like to raise. I'd be glad to answer.
The examples you've given, Mr. Jacoby, these are real-life examples that have gone before the commission?
Yeah, well, the advisory opinions are advisory opinions. These were opinions that were rendered based on board members requesting an opinion.
I see.
So They haven't been ethics, but the one I talked about, the board president issuing a race notice to the BA, that's a real case.
Okay.
And the other one in Pertham was a real case. And the bottom line is they're taking a much more stringent look at ethics in government, which is a good thing. And so it's just imperative that each one of you know that you have a resource. I could be your resource. I am your resource, and we can use the School Ethics Commission as an advisory resource if we need to.
Thanks. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Jacoby. All right, next we have to jump into a short closed session. We will be back, though, and back on camera right after. So may I have the following motion? Whereas the Board of Education must discuss matters which are not appropriate for discussion in public meeting, and whereas these subjects are within the exception to the Open Public Meetings Act and are permitted to be discussed in closed session pursuant to NJSA 10412B, and whereas the Board intends to discuss matters as follows. Pursuant to 10412B8, any matter involving the employment, appointment, termination of employment, terms and conditions of employment, evaluation, performance of, promotion, or discipline of any specific prospective public officer or employee or current public officer or employee employed by or appointed by the public body, unless all individual employees or appointees whose rights could be adversely affected request in writing such matter be discussed at public meeting. The nature of the matter specifically described is employees number 11268, 11281, 21869, and 23633. Pursuant to 10412B6, any tactics and techniques utilized in protecting the safety and property of public, provided their disclosure could impair such protection, any investigations of violations of possible violations of the law, the nature of the matter described as technology infrastructure security. Whereas we estimate this to be 20 minutes after the public meeting shall reconvene and continue on with the regular business. Now therefore be it resolved that we will recess into closed session for the aforesaid subjects, and they will be made public at the time when the need for non-disclosure no longer exists.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Cohen, second by Mrs. Becker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Don't go away, we will be back.